and please give them a warm welcome.
Okay, thank you, Royd. Thank you for stealing my first question, which was who's experienced conflict in their role. The other question, okay, today's all about that. I'll tell you more about that in a few moments. The other question I'm interested in is who feels uncomfortable about the prospect of dealing with conflict or when they're in those sorts of situations? Ooh, so maybe not quite as many as actually experience the conflict themselves, but it's very common, okay, for that sort of stuff to get in here and to sort of mess with us as people. So part of what I want to do today is share a model that we use, a map that you can use to deconstruct what's going on and give you a sense of how can I deal with what's happening right now. Okay, this is something we've used in lots of different places. To manage your expectations, I use this a lot in organisations, in groups. Okay, we've never done a presentation with, what have we got, maybe 60 people in the room. So getting interactions out of 20 people is actually a lot easier than 60, but you're definitely invited into this conversation because the expectation is we'll share some stuff and then you're going to tell us what works for you, what you've learned from your own experiences of conflict that actually is really helpful. So my intent at the next hour is for you to do quite a lot of the talking and to share stuff that's worked really well for you. And that's typically how we work. So quickly about Ideasmiths, there's kind of two bits of us, and I look after the change. I work with broken teams, broken organisations, and try and fix them, so I spend a lot of time in that kind of space, doing the kind of things you see on the flyer. And that's in corporate context as well as digital and IT, so we do all sorts of that. We're a collective. There's lots of partners and associates, and people use Ideasmiths as a vehicle. So if you've ever fancied doing a bit of consulting but didn't want to set up a business or just wanted to try it and get in and out easily, we can do that. Talk about that afterwards if you're interested. Okay, so that's us. Ian and I, we're really different people. Okay, Ideasmiths came about through a set of shared values, which is about co-creation and emergence and supporting each other and challenging each other. And that's what we do when we work with people. Okay, so my background, you know a bit about me, is corporate change predominantly. Coaching and mentoring is part of that mix, strategy, all sorts of stuff. Okay, Ian, you're quite different?
Yeah, my background's as a psychologist. So I've done the full chartership bit, but not clinical. It was always business psychology stuff, so people in organisations. And I've always been interested in techie stuff since the early 1980s when, you know, the first computers I used at university and people were trying to use them and they were screaming and shouting at the mainframes because then it said card and there were no cards and it was all green screens. But they just moved from paper and all that. And I got interested in more the usability and interactive stuff that was coming around then. How do you make stuff so people can use it? But from that, working as a psychologist, I go, well, okay, they're all using this kit, but people are all in teams using the kit, and then there's an issue with teams and how they socially interact because a computer's dead if a human being doesn't use it, but actually we communicate a lot as well and we work as teams. And then you have the old organisational stuff and organisational change I got interested in because I've seen, particularly in public sector work I've done, unbelievably expensive computer systems go into the public sector. I think the first one I worked on was £600 million, and that was in the 1990s, 91, when £600 million was a lot of money then. It's not quite so much now. And, you know, you go, oh, and it goes in, and everybody's working the way they did last year because the 2-hour training program really wasn't enough, and nobody did change apart from a bit of comms, and I've seen some quite appalling change stuff done as all that kind of stuff. So I'm interested in all of that, but mainly where tech happens. At the moment, I'm doing user research stuff, but I've also done change stuff. So I'm always interested in the IT bit and what happens for both the user and the organisation.
Okay, so Ian and I are very different, okay, and we want to bring you into the conversation and talk about that. The way it's likely to work, okay, everyone's different, okay, it's not improvised, but it tends to play out in different ways each time we do this, is I'm going to try and be the pragmatic person here. I've lived through all sorts of very interesting conflicts. I've gone into organisations where the MD was going to jail tomorrow if we didn't sort something out. I've been in meetings where someone was so upset they threw a chair through a window and followed me into the toilet afterwards and threatened to kill me. Okay, so I've lived in a world where conflict is kind of And because I'm usually the agent of change in organisations, they see me as the bad person. Okay, so I can draw on that experience if that's helpful. Ian's the clever guy who knows the stuff that sits behind the things that we do. So part of what we're hoping to do is unpack some of this stuff and go, that works because. So one of the things we're going to send out afterwards, we've got quite a reading list that sits behind this that supports this. So for the people who don't want to engage and talk and get involved, there'll be some stuff you can read. Okay, so you can sit quietly and think about it, and then you'll get the books to have a look at.
But there's no, as you see, there's no PowerPoint where we go through loads of models on personality or conflict or change or communication, because you would all get bored shitless by the end of it and you wouldn't have learnt anything. So it's about you telling us stuff as well and working stuff out.
So yeah, normally I'd write on the walls, and I was told we're not allowed to do that today. So I found some old brown paper. Okay, good management consultant always has some brown paper. And Ian writes quite clearly. I don't. So I've actually prepared some of my stuff in really careful handwriting. If you still can't read it, which is almost certain at the back, you might struggle with some of this, just let me read it out for you. So we're going to build this up. Okay, and it's a construct and be some bits hanging off here. And then on this side is the stuff that we find works in these spaces. Okay, so let me talk you through the construct just very quickly. And it begins with this idea that we're going to focus predominantly on conflict that arises between individuals. And the emphasis is on you as an individual trying to think about, what could I do differently here? How could I be an agent of change in this context? Okay, if you want to talk about how to deal with collective stuff, then we can talk about that over a beer later. But it's very much about you. If you're in a difficult situation, this can help unpick it, and then you can think about, okay, what sort of stuff could I do?
Because I think something about conflict, particularly if you're in a situation where you are uncomfortable, it can all seem overwhelming. And where do I do, and what can I do, and what are the options, and how do I get myself out of this, and what's the first steps? And that's when people start to lose, concepts of agency. I have some control or power in here. So what we'd like to bring out as we go through the model is kind of, as we certainly come out with some solutions, and you'll come out with some stuff that you've done, is people saying how and when and where you can still have some control. You're not necessarily, hanging onto a tiger by its tail type thing.
Can I give you that? Just very quickly, I want to get some clear expectations. Okay, so I'm facilitator, managing consultant, that's kind of the stuff I do. The two things I really want to emphasise is about confidentiality. Okay, please, if you've got a conflict you want to share with us that we can then talk about and use as a case, you don't have to tell us who it is or where it happened. Okay, we're not here for therapy, we're here to try and use these as cases. Okay, and if names get mentioned, then those can stay in the room. Okay, so there's that aspect of it. What's the other one? Oh, yeah, self-responsibility, I suppose. So if you don't want to involve yourself in the conversation, that's fine. Okay, but we're looking for you to come up with the answers, because I don't want to give you ours, because they might not actually be appropriate and relevant for you. Anything else? Anything you would like up there?
So, quick thing, if anybody wondering, this is what a source of management consultants do once there was a chat and they go, you and you, come up and role play it. We won't be doing that, okay?
Well, unless you want to.
Unless you want to, but it's your choice.
Mm. Okay, you're all really quiet. Is that normal? Okay. Right. Let me tell you a story while Ian writes this. We can always add to that later. So there was a very interesting situation, very particular situation I got involved in, which doesn't sound like it would create conflict at all, actually. I was asked by a large organisation to review its measurement framework. Okay, so like go in, talk to loads of senior people and do some stuff. And it sounded quite dry and quite dull, actually. And I arranged a whole ton of meetings with senior people, and I walked into the room to meet this guy called Peter. Okay, and pretty much the minute I walked in that door, Peter was kind of red, angry, and shouting. Okay, he was really not happy. And I just didn't get what was going on at that point. Okay, but I knew I'd been in this situation often enough to know, okay, just kind of sit with this. It's going to pass. It's probably not about me. And we were kind of in this space. So what I was thinking in those first 3 or 4 seconds was there's something happening about communication or not happening. Ooh. So I've got this super Pritt stick, and I'm hoping it works. So the first thought in my mind is there been a misunderstanding? Does he think I'm the enemy here? Has somebody said something? Yeah, have you been in situations like this? You go into a meeting and suddenly somebody's on a completely different page, and you think, oh shit. So anyway, I was okay. Let Peter rant on a little bit. And then it started to become clear the things he was angry about seemed to be about his agenda, about something that was going on either in his department or in himself. So this is a different kind of space. And this felt very much like, I'll read these out. So this is about goals. And at that point, I couldn't tell whether Peter is angry about the organisational goal, so I can see squinting at the back. He's a head of department, senior manager. Is there some organisational goal that is really upsetting him here? Or is there something about his own personal agenda here? And what can happen in conflict situations is you get those muddled up. And often I find quite senior people are very good at veiling one as the other. Okay, so again, I don't know if you kind of recognise that. So we're in this world. He's been going 3 or 4 minutes now. He's still angry. Okay, he's still seething. The person I had with me, she's getting a little bit upset at this point. She'd not really had that experience before. And I was sort of saying, it's okay, just sit with this, let's see where we go. And then what started to kind of cross my mind was, maybe this is about Peter. Yeah? Who we are is a whole bunch of different things. And maybe that's where this problem has come from. Maybe he knows why we're here. Maybe he's quite clear what the agenda is. And he's just like this. His values, his beliefs. This is the kind of person he is. And again, an open question. I've certainly worked with people who are always like that. They're always angry. And they're kind of hard to work with, but that's just who they are. So anyway, I sort of sat with Peter for a little while and thought, well, okay, maybe, which one do I think this? Yeah, maybe what's going on here is actually about his values and beliefs. Because part of who we are is about the values and beliefs that we have. Okay. 15 minutes have gone by, okay, which is actually quite a long time to be in front of a very angry person. And it's also quite exhausting. There might actually be somebody in the room that's like this. Some people can be angry for about 10 or 15 minutes and then they run out of steam. Okay. I think the longest I've experienced is maybe 20 minutes, which is quite remarkable endurance for an angry person. And what I think you then run into is a different kind of space. And this is really where Peter was. I think this is in a completely different box. Okay, you might notice triangle. Okay, got layers, and then we have a box down here about being human. And after about 15 minutes, Peter starts to calm down. He starts to actually be okay. He starts being less purple and starts talking to me. And so let's add another one of these. So the particular thing that was going on there was he was, in my world, duress. Ian calls it more emotions. There was an emotional response going on here. Okay, and we all do this. There's loads of books out there like Fast Brain, Slow Brain, and all this sort of stuff. That when you're put into a situation that you find uncomfortable, the most likely response you will get is some sort of emotion that we feel in here. Okay, and I use the term duress behaviours because for me, you can do something about that, actually. And what I did for Peter was actually, I gave him the time and the space to offload a whole ton of stuff that wasn't about me, but it was about the project. It was about the history of his experience with that organisation and the measurement framework and all that sort of stuff. And after 20 minutes, he'd got that out. he was able to calm down. And we were able to actually spend a little bit more time being grown-ups and talking about this.
Just a couple of things on the duress and the emotional side. The first thing is because I think a lot of you probably techies, agile in technical environments, and a lot of people think they're scientists. So I'm logical and I'm rational, and everything I do is logical and rational and wonderful because I've been trained and I'm qualified, and we forget about our emotional responses. And so what we actually end up being is not rational, but rationalizing. We've done the emotional response. Now we have to justify it with lots of lovely, logical, expert bullshit to explain why our position is the right position and it's the right place to be, and you're just digging yourself in more and more. And if you've ever been in a group of people in a project all doing that, it's a bit weird because everybody's just jumped into their bunker and they're the one who's fucking right. And, because they're logical and rational. It's a logical, rational argument and you're not getting it. So therefore, you're the emotional idiot, not me. And that's where people end up. So that's one, I don't know whether that's hit a chord with some people, but that's something that I've seen work quite a lot.
Okay, so just quickly checking in, does this as a construct kind of make sense in terms of your experience of conflict in organisations?
Yeah.
Okay, so can you see how you can unpack what's going on? I'm going to focus on you for a moment because you talked to me.
Yeah,
so that's really cool. Thank you.
So I've just started being a team leader, and I can see that in my one-to-ones.
Yeah.
You get someone in a situation and they come in and they're like, rah, 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 and you give them a bit of time and you can see them working through that level, and the rationalisation as well.
So again, part of what we want to talk about now and bring out from the room is what stuff would you put on this side of the page? I'm sorry, I don't have giant post-its, so we might write on the own paper. But yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, for me, when there's conflict, I tend to start naturally in this box. That's going to fall off. Because people are really good at not being rational. Yeah, there's a whole ton of stuff. I mean, he's a psychologist, but we've all got cognitive biases and filters and all sorts of rubbish that goes on in our heads. And we were chatting over coffee earlier. And I don't think I know anybody that's more than maybe 25% rational, actually, as a human being. I mean, and maybe that ratio is higher in here because everybody's quite technical. But actually, in here, people are really quite fuzzy and messy. Yeah, chip in, please.
So, do you think that's now the process that everybody goes through? And it's about clicking when they get...
Oh, it's such a techie question. Thank you. No, I don't know. I think Peter was here right from the off. And it just took me a while to figure that out. And maybe the way I told the story, I think quite often stuff happens up here. And if there is a misunderstanding and you don't pick up on it, my wife's brilliant at this. We're so different. She'll pick up a misunderstanding, and within 5 minutes, she's just right off on one, and we're in big. So, but no, it's really messy, I think.
I think this model is more there. This is probably represents like 100 books in coaching, mentoring, applied psychology, all that kind of stuff. This is kind of just a simple model to help you when you're in this kind of situation with a Peter or whatever, figure out which bit am I dealing with here? Because I think if you spend some time to kind of do that, that really helps. Because if you go into this thing, this person has a comms problem, they don't understand how to communicate, and they're actually in issues around values and beliefs and all kinds of other things, you're going to have some real problems dealing with that person because you've made the wrong assumption about them.
Yeah, so just, yeah, go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say, so I worked with Gwen at the job that she was describing earlier.
Okay.
And that was mental, as she described. But after that, we also had a job together, and we were, in the early days at least, and Gwen, correct me if I'm wrong, at each other's throats. And we hated each other, right?
Okay.
It was difficult. And over time, we kind of slowly wore each other down and were arguing all the time and clashing all the time.
Are you now married?
What I would say is we are now good friends.
Really good friends.
We're
Okay.
good friends, we go for beers all the time. So like we got through our differences, we kind of realised that actually our agendas clashed and there was a misunderstanding and our values were wrong, and like over a period of time we actually got through that
I
Yeah.
think we had to scream at each other one day.
Oh,
The
I
day where
remember
bought-
sitting in a meeting room and we were literally screaming at each other and our boss was like, guys, stop. And we're like, no, we need this. And eventually we did it and you know what, we're good friends now and I reckon we will be for a long time still because we've got similar beliefs. You know?
Yeah.
Can I throw something else there? How about the people who pretty much act in a very polite English manner, and it's the other kind of side of that coin where it's you think you get along, but actually on a deep down level you really don't like each other
Okay.
at all.
So taking those two together, I think, yeah, talking to people is a really good way to start resolving it. And I think what you're sort of unpicking, so I didn't think of your name, is it Bev? So, sorry, Eve. So you're kind of talking in inverted commas, so let's have a talk, when all you're really doing is just kind of skirting over things. For me personally, I get, as I say, lots of conflict tends to crop up because it goes with my job. The first thing I will do is go and see this person. Yeah, I will not email or instant message or anything like that. I want to talk to this person face to face. And that seems to be, I don't know, I don't live in your world, but that seems to be something that people are a bit reluctant to do sometimes.
It's easy to hide behind things, and if people are scared to actually have conflict because maybe they don't believe themselves they can deal with it or things like that, they'll hide behind email or Slack or something like that. And then you get into a whole nest of other problems because it's tone on email and tone on text, for example.
Well, yeah.
But I think as soon as you start relating to the person as being a human being with the same worries and the same constraints that you've got, you're already there, and you're building up trust, you're building up rapport, you're empathising, and you go, do you know what, life is pretty shit. But I'm not here to make it any shit, I'm here to actually...
Yeah, there's a couple of things I'd pull out of that. You mentioned the issue about people who are scared about conflict and saying how people seem to pussyfoot round and all be terribly polite and nice and English and a cup of tea, and we went, okay, why are people scared of conflict, do you think? What's kind of, think about being scared of conflict? Any idea?
Pick me.
Go on.
Because they're scared of emotions.
Yeah, the emotion.
Yeah.
Getting red in the face.
Yeah.
I think there's emotion and uncertainty for me.
Yeah.
I think it can compromise you from like your position as well.
Right.
So how people perceive you.
Yeah.
So like, especially as a female working in tech, if you're seen as a little bit like, then someone's going to go, you know what, she's just all ruled by emotions. There's no logic.
Yeah,
Whereas actually we're all
always going off on one. Yeah. Is it what's the date? That kind of stuff you start to get happening. Issues with that is kind of the language that's used, how people approach it. The other thing, I think a lot of people's experience of conflict is very negative. Think of being told off by parents, told off at school, all that kind of stuff. And actually not many of us have really positive experiences of stuff like raising issues and feedback and discussing stuff. And it's quite weird. I was with somebody once and she and I were having a discussion. She was also a psychologist, and you just went, Ian, just fucking argue back, just shout back. And I was doing the psychologist, how do we talk about this and how do we sort it? And you guys said, fucking shout, will you? And this is a problem, I think people aren't used to that experience sometimes. And it's quite weird when it starts to happen because it can look a little bit manipulative as well. But it's that kind of, a lot of people when they get a positive experience of feedback, it's like, oh, first time in my life, nobody's ever, I once did some feedback to somebody because I was doing some psychometric testing stuff, and they said, I've told you more in 10 minutes than I've told my boss in about 5 years. Because they'd never done that conversation in that way. And I think the comms thing can be quite a nice tool for that.
Conflict as well, it can be almost like the Bambi thing, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. So it's learning, it's learning how to say the really horrible stuff. Because I think that's one of the tricks is how to give.
We're going to disagree again.
Okay,
aren't we?
yeah, because you're coaching and mentoring. I think, how do we tell people things about them which maybe aren't the greatest things to tell them? And I think there's with feedback is sometimes called how do you serve the shit sandwich, really. So tell them something nice, I wish you hadn't done that in that way, tell them something nice.
I used to work at Sky,
Okay.
Sorry, two questions. This management thing, they said don't do the shit sandwich or the feedback wrap or whatever, because people expect, oh, your hair looks nice, but you know your shoes are horrible. But you know your shirt is lovely, because as soon as you give that positive, they go right, okay, and they don't actually hear the positive because they've switched on because they're waiting for the bad feedback to come, and they just said just go in, just say look. This is the situation, this was the incident, this is the actions that we're going to do, and do you want to describe your feelings and all this kind of stuff? Then it's just be upfront, because people actually expect that, or, people respond to it better than having a...
Okay.
Yeah. Well, in terms of things you can do, I've just put feedback as a big thing over here. And I think there are lots of different ways of doing it, and some bad ways of doing it. I think one of the things I'm going to slightly disagree with Ian about is another part of being human, which is about overstrengths. Forgive me if you've kind of already explored this kind of space, but it's this idea that we're good at stuff, and actually that can be a bad thing sometimes. So I'm really good at being all soft and fluffy and friendly and figuring stuff out and helping people. But you know what? If the house is burning down, you don't want me in charge of the fire brigade. You want somebody to shout and get it done. And sometimes people pay too much attention to their strengths. And feedback's really important to help people recognise what they're good at, and also recognise when what they're good at's becoming a little bit too much in this context, in this moment. And there's a skill in feedback that you're kind of describing of how do you do that gets listened to and gets taken on board and gets sort of used. We've put a couple of flyers up at the back actually, and one of those is about feedback, because I think for us it's the core of how organisations get better at what they do. And it's figuring out what works right in your organisation. Yeah, and so many corporates are really good at the shit sandwichy thing, because they don't know what else to do, actually. And what you're describing is be human about it, be direct about it.
I've got a friend, my friend's got a customer. Okay. And it's actually not a customer, it's a customer's director. And the customer director is very senior and has got power.
Okay.
He's a bully, and he's a tolerated bully because they have power.
Okay.
So that feedback loop isn't going to be there, because no one's going to provide that feedback, because they're going to be on that. There's something if they say, oh, by the way, you know, I don't want you to have my product owner in tears anymore, because they have power, and so there's no channel for that communication. Apart from graffiti on the wall with the office mate.
You are a...
No, I may build a rapport with that person. Do you need to not relate to them and work out, right, they are a bully, and we recognise them as a bully, but I'm actually going to try and work out what makes you tick, so I can actually try and work and say, right, you realise this behaviour you're doing is actually having this detrimental effect, but it's the only way you can actually start doing that thing is building that trust with them, so you can have that relationship. That's why we hire consultants.
Yes, to raise this stuff with people and then see if they respond. If they don't respond, then you know you've got to take other actions. Some stuff that I think Adrian's had is when you raise some stuff with some bullies who are in the project role, they don't really think that they are, and that there's a lack of insight there. They don't, and some people clearly do, and that's their way of getting stuff done is by pushing people.
Yeah, so it's what you're describing. You use a consultant to give them the bad message, to give them the feedback so it gets heard. And yeah, I think there is a subtlety and a skill in dealing with that. I actually made 2 special post-its in case I needed them. And one says ego, because I'm not quite sure where it fits. Now, I mostly work in corporates and charities and the NHS and those kind of places. And I would say the only places I think I've bumped into ego being a big problem, and I kind of think what you're describing is about ego, is with surgeons, occasionally, and with actors, the talent, okay? And these are people who think it's okay, their values and beliefs, that I can be a git, okay, because you need me. I have power, and you can't get rid of me. And again, I don't know if it's true for people here, but
I think that.
thank you. So egos are
describing rockstar developers as well, though.
Yeah, I'm going to say I think that bottom section is you know, overstrengths and ego things. They're the things that destroy good outcomes with software projects regularly, because you know, collaboration is destroyed. But you know, people aren't comfortable collaborating. If everybody isn't collaborating in the same style, you know, other people will retreat from it, and other people will win.
And the issue is about this stuff being tolerated in organisations. And I think this is the thing about you know, when they say the HR policy, which is all has this, you know, we are equal ops and we have all this stuff and this stuff, and you go, no, you're not, because we keep seeing this stuff happening. I was in an organisation that actually didn't do it. EDS doesn't exist anymore, but there were many issues with them. But one thing was they would not accept rockstar developers. If you went there and said, if I don't get another $5,000 and a bonus, I'm out. And they go, yeah, okay, there's the door, fuck off. And they would say, we can always get somebody else. And it's interesting if organisations take that thing where they go, we can work around it.
Okay, so Ian's, so go on.
Can I ask a question? So I'm going into a situation, I've been asked to take on another team, and part of that team is we've got a rockstar developer, we've got bullying going on.
Okay.
The other half of the team have got the Indian culture.
Okay.
So there's a lot of bullying going on between the two. So I'm trying to think of how do I go down there and approach it, and I was actually going to ignore the bad behaviour and focus on those people who are collaborating, but just listening to what you've been saying, would I be better to try and tackle the one or two individuals who are...
Yeah.
Okay. Can I put a health warning in here?
Yeah.
I don't know, is the honest answer. Okay, don't sue us if you go in there and tomorrow everybody walks out. The reason, one of our core values is about co-creation, and that's a really good way of absolving your own responsibility for fucking up as a consultant, actually. So I'm going to ask the room, actually, to help in that kind of context. So what would people suggest?
I've absolutely been in that position in one of my first positions ever, to the point where I was called into a meeting room, screamed at and made to cry on my way home. That manager was fired 3 days later when I went up to his director and made sure he knew exactly what he'd done. It was done because there was a rockstar developer in the room who was consistently had raises above everybody else, and everybody else's pay was frozen because he was so integral to the product, and he was, and he knew it. And he was a deeply unpleasant man. He was extremely clever. He is actually famous, so I won't tell you who he is because you all know who he is in the room. Yes, he's brilliant, but he's the sort of person who got put in the dark corner to do clever things, and he should go nowhere near people. And to leave someone like that in a team full of normal developers who are trying to collaborate is toxic, and they should be removed.
Yeah.
Can I tell you what we've done with that at the moment? Like, so I was really disappointed that this happened. So a developer on one of our teams bullied the fuck out of one of my testers, and he did rockstar stuff like saying, "Oh, we can," and he was a fucking superhero. This dude is an arsehole, and like absolute arsehole. And so they moved the tester out of the team into another team, and this guy got to continue being an absolute prick kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he's eventually left, but it's really unfair, like, you know, so it's really horrible that the tester had to move because this dude was a jerk, and like, you know, he's got someone protecting him. The Scrum Master's like, "Oh, you poor baby," like, you know, and it's like, he's a jerk though, like, and he's bullied someone. Don't lick his butthole. And
Isn't it?
yeah, so like.
Isn't it strange in 2017 we're still getting that stuff? I saw it in the 1990s, and that was very software engineering and macho management type thing. And you go, this is 2017 in Agile, and we read the Agile manifesto and empowered teams. And this is, we shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be talking.
But doesn't that come down to the box at the bottom which says being human and who we are?
Yeah, and this is because I think there's a lot of people in management responsibilities or in a way who really don't know how to deal with this stuff.
That's the thing, I think. They're not equipped to fight that battle.
Yes.
Should you be fighting that battle?
Yeah.
So the person you're coming up against is a red flag personality, and you're not equipped as a person to deal with that. Should you be, are you recommending that you should be trying to deal with
It's an issue we see in highly technical organisations, lawyers, architects, engineers, all of that. One lawyer said to me once, I walked into the office one day at the age of 37, and there was this team of people looking at me, and I thought, I had no idea how to manage you, because all the company had done is train them to be a lawyer. I think. But I'll let you. Sorry.
Can I come in a second just to answer your question?
I was just going to say.
So chap behind actually. So yeah, bendy finger. So yes, you there. I don't think we're making any recommendations. Our intent was to offer a construct and have a conversation.
The construct you offer, you can't think you've not been mentioned about it. If someone's in that situation, should they not evaluate their own skill set and say, am I equipped to deal with this?
Yeah. Okay. That's my other special code. We'll probably come on to that in a minute. But yeah, I think what we want to do today is talk about very much what we can do as individuals. There's a lot of organisational stuff and HR stuff and law that is there as well. We're not really experts in that stuff.
Do you not think a lot of this stuff are leadership problems? And
unpack that a bit. What do you mean by that?
Well, I don't know. Throughout my entire working life, I've always thought I've been managed by, the management generally has been pretty mediocre. And I think that, so that you can do certain things around, if you're not in charge to help kind of influence things, but, there's a limit to that because of your sphere of influence. And, especially the thing I'm familiar with, kind of technical organisations, technical teams, it's a management issue not creating this or giving room for kind of all that kind of.
It is, but it's always going to happen, isn't it? There's always going to be stuff sparking off between individuals.
There's always forces that are trying to pull it in different directions like that. But is it not a leadership job to?
I think that's one part of the puzzle. I'm going to sort of park that a little bit if I can, because I think today we wanted to explore what we as individuals could do differently. And yeah, HR has got a role. Your managers and leaders of the organisations have got a role. But actually, we can all do something. And we can do things like talking to people and giving them feedback and other stuff. And that was the kind of space I wanted to go into. I think we're not HR lawyers. We know them if you want to talk to one, but it's a different kind of world.
We have done stuff around leadership, coaching and mentoring and stuff. I know you've done some of that stuff. So,
oh, yeah, absolutely.
And with Kathy and some of our associates and things. So, yes, there is a role for the leader, and leadership needs to get better.
I suppose sort of part of my point was I think that some of this stuff, some of this behaviour is sort of tolerated or even occasionally mildly encouraged if it meets a short-term goal. Certainly, rockstar developers are often given space to carry on because it's like, oh, we need to get stuff done by next Friday, and it might be toxic, but it's going to achieve some.
It's about making them replaceable, isn't it? Like pulling them off the important projects.
Yeah. And I would say nobody is irreplaceable. I say everybody. Organisations won't always take that risk.
So I just want to say really quickly, there's no such thing as a rock star. There's just people who play music. We're all the same. Except some people who really want to play the sickest solo ever, but kind of be a shit person. That doesn't make them cool. That makes them a really good musician. We're all doing the same thing. It's okay to tell.
But I think there are individuals that.
All as a Mozart. I mean, that's the difference.
Yeah, exactly.
There are really genuinely talented people, but they've got to play ball.
Exactly.
It's a short-term thing to go for those quick wins, obviously. You've got, and ultimately, if they're either going to play ball and accept the culture of the team, or they have to change.
Yeah, I mean, I work with surgeons occasionally and lawyers, and the same sort of thing crops up, but it's not tolerated in the same kinds of ways anymore. It's not culturally acceptable to be like that. And I think digital and IT, it still is, actually, and in the sort of the BBC and the theatrical world it is as well.
Because the issue that's come out in a lot of those places is it just fails. The surgeon ends up killing somebody. Some wonderful, well, it's not wonderful. It is in airlines where they used to have the hop to trot pilot, and they were the great one, and they've got rid of that. It's now a team because there's some of the black boxes where the co-pilot's going, you're too low, and the pilot goes, you're co-pilot, you can't fucking fly, smacking mountain. And people go, yeah, we don't need this stuff anymore. So a lot of cultures are changing in all
Since business don't really appreciate what IT does, they don't see it as a partnership, they see it as a customer service relationship.
Right.
So it's deliver this by this time. And that's where the problems come, because then when you're in that team and you've got a developer that is really good. You say, look, just do this, just get it out the door, and we'll worry about it later. Because you can't, well, you can go have that negotiation, but it's a very difficult, well, you're having conflict.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand the pressures, because they haven't actually worked in an IT environment before. So
Yeah.
it's like, well, let's just do that, isn't it? And you go, no, we're
Yeah.
building this for the first time.
Yeah.
So
There's a difference between a IT support department who write software to support the business and a software development company who write games or write a product to sell. The people who write product to sell, although they do have deadlines and have to hit them, often want to produce a quality product, whereas the business, who say, for example, might be a law firm, don't really care. What they want to do, if they're great lawyers, what they need is a system that can support them to be great lawyers. And if you have to cut a few corners to get a deadline met so they can get their closing in on time, then that's so be it. And that clashes completely with the culture of their developers of certain men.
Okay.
I think another thing that doesn't help is that we idolise people who are known for being arsehole developers and arsehole software devs. So like Steve Jobs is well documented as being quite a dick, but is idolised by an awful lot of people.
Yeah. So some people just think that's in our industry. Yeah.
Well, yeah, true.
Yeah. So maybe there's an issue with the whole, as we go, who's our stars? Those. I need to be like them. Let's find.
Can I derail this conversation?
Yeah,
sorry. Shut you up. Can I derail just for a few minutes? I'm conscious we're spending a lot of time in this kind of space. We've been here 45 minutes already. Yeah, I know it feels really important. Maybe we'll come back to it in the last 5 minutes.
I did have a point I wanted to make, which is above that box.
Okay.
I often get in a lot of trouble because I often think that people don't really understand what it is I'm doing. I see conflict as an agent of change in an organisation, and so I will sit in a meeting and not nastily, but I will deliberately say things that I don't believe to be true to see what people will say and react. And it's interesting because I often use those reactions to then prove my point in the opposite direction. It gets me in all sorts of trouble and I have to be shouted at.
Okay, so just building on that, so I didn't really get a chance to do it at the start. Like I said, this is normally part of a whole day thing. One of the assumptions that we try and challenge right at the beginning of any conversation about conflict is that conflict's a bad thing. And the analogy I use is an elastic band. So you've got person A over here with one point of view and somebody over here with a different point of view. There's tension, there's energy that's there. The problem with conflict is when that energy gets misused or gets to disrupt what you're trying to achieve. And I think I was chatting to somebody earlier and they said, well, we don't have any conflict in our organisation. And to me, that's equally dysfunctional, actually, because you're clearly not talking to each other, you're not giving enough feedback, you're not doing that sort of thing. So, yeah, please don't accept conflict as a bad thing. Okay, I think it's inevitable, and it's figuring out how do we deal with that. What I want to do, our intent was to focus very much on solutions, not just to sort of have a bit of therapy around egos. So I want to put a couple of things up in this space in terms of the kinds of things that we would use just to kind of get the ball rolling, really, to have a conversation about it. So if the conflict seems to be centred around agendas, the simplest tool that I'll put the initial up first, the easiest tool, can't spell, is, for me, it's called ADI. I don't know if people have come across this. Okay. So I've got a 10-year-old girl, one of my children's 10, and she wants a smartphone. Okay, she's adamant it has to be a smartphone. So what we've talked about is what's this about? Why a smartphone? And I think we've agreed that she needs a phone. Okay, because I get home late sometimes, she's out and about, she wants to be able to contact me. So we've agreed in the space of this problem that there's stuff that we agree with. We don't agree, we disagree that it needs to be a smartphone. Actually, I don't see why she can't have one of my old bricks, actually, and then, it's still going to work as a phone, it's going to solve that problem. She then throws in the argument that her mate Billy's got an iPhone. So to me, that's irrelevant, actually. And as a construct, as a really simple thing, I find this can be quite helpful in a conflict situation that's about agendas and all sorts of stuff's going on. It's like, where do we disagree? Where do we agree? And what's irrelevant here? And often just by trying to figure out what do we agree on, you can have a sensible conversation that doesn't become a conflicted conversation. So, yeah, Amy and I don't agree, actually, but I think she's likely to get a phone of some kind, and hopefully we'll figure that out.
Why don't you want to have a smartphone?
She'll break it.
He doesn't have one himself and he can't work them. I just kind of that one.
Oh, you're kidding?
Oh yeah, bit of disclosure. Yeah, I don't have a smartphone. I've got a brick, a proper phone, you know, to ring people, not a toy. Okay, we'll talk about that later.
I'm a little bit sort of on this side here, but maybe there's a bit of a misunderstanding. Maybe what you're saying is irrelevant is actually very relevant to a 10-year-old who wants to communicate with their friend Billy.
Yeah.
But we're making the assumption that you as the parent is right and the child needs to learn from the parent.
Okay.
But,
Yeah.
so
She'll never ring you up on that smartphone.
Or we can go in this space. Yes.
I'm going to say she doesn't want a smartphone to ring you up. She'll never ring you up.
I use the same argument with my daughter. She's got an iPhone now.
Did you buy it for her?
I'm currently buying an iPhone. Yes, it's under my name. It's basically there's a lot of peer pressure. I went right. No, but the thing is, I was like Victorian dad, right? Just it's a phone. And here's 50 pence. We used to do this in the phone box and just call me if you need to miss the bus or whatever. And it was only when she was explaining to me that in the canteen at school that everybody was taking the mick out of her phone, and she felt so awful showing it out and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I know, I'm a bad parent. And it was like, actually, I can really relate to them as a human being and understand why she's wanting. And you know, for me, it was all about safety, but actually for her, it was a status thing. And the fact that she wasn't using this brick, and we've still got it, and it's always like the threat.
Yeah. So we're back up here, aren't we?
Yeah.
And
status is an interesting thing.
Having a smartphone, I'm telling you now, just go for it.
Thank you.
Concentrate on what's important.
Yeah.
What about the white elephants, the cultural white elephants in the business, or the personal ones that stop them having that conversation? They're in the room, but they feel they can't get that.
Yeah.
Can you unpick that one for me? I'm not sure.
So what you mean? It's like, so people don't feel their organisation is a safe place where you can have those kinds of discussions. And that's, I think, where that comes from, because a lot of organisations, there's wonderful corporate stuff and the HR stuff and the 5-year plans, and you know, we're a people organisation and we love our employees. They're the most important asset. And I always remind myself of the Dilbert cartoons where they figure out, the business analyst figures out the photocopiers the more important than they are. And what happens in a lot of organisations is people pretty quickly work out what the actual values and beliefs are. So you have espoused, we love our staff, they are our most important asset, and pretty quickly how an organisation does stuff to you and to people figure out what the actual values are. A lot of organisations unfortunately do that. They sometimes have the staff attitude survey once every 12 months where those things can be brought out. It's looking at in your organisation what are the channels for doing that, or how can you at least locally make this change? And what are the actions that you can take locally? So, you know, the espouse stuff and the actual is the same.
How do you deal with that? So, how do you deal with a situation where it used to be one way, and you've got people who have absorbed that, and things are actually now the other way, and they're better, but people don't want to move over.
Right. That stuff around. We do organisational change and people and change stuff. That's a long-term process. If it's an organisational thing, we use tool X. We're now using tool Y. If it's this was acceptable behaviour. It's not now. It's this. You're bringing people. One of the issues, of course, if you select people based on their skills, and then the skill sets require change, you can retrain people. If it's about ways of doing things,
and culture and behaviour and attitudes, that's a lot more difficult to change. An organisation has a choice, put an awful lot of money, time and resource into a person to help them change, or get rid of them and get somebody else in. That's a higher kind of HS.
I like the idea of overstrength there, because I think sometimes you get someone who's like, you know, I'm a really good dev, or I'm a really good tester, or I do ops. And then you get someone trying to do like TDD or DevOps or something, and suddenly you've only got half the skills. You're really good at that end of the skill. And trying to get a team to start being kind of rubbish at the other end of the thing. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
I think in the IT space, it's very common that people, it's a comfortable place to be a specialist, because often you can, because of your sphere of influence, if your sphere of influence isn't very, wide, you can sort of still feel good about what you're doing by being a specialist in your thing. And, the rest of the thing you're involved in might not be, the outcomes might not be great, but you can kind of help to prop up your own values by, and I think that for me, this gives rise to people inventing job titles like, I apologise for any architects in the room, and I used to be an architect at one time. For me, that's a sort of an outcome there where I'm involved in projects which I think are sort of failures all the time, but I want to feel good about coming to work and what I do. So if I'm an architect and I can kind of design things in theory, I can be good at that, and I can feel good about myself. And
you were good at it.
And that's not to deride those, people and saying, because I feel like I subconsciously went through that thought process myself. I was trying to sort of invent a job role that I could sort of felt like I could perform well in. And the real solution is to kind of have teams that collaborate more and produce better outcomes. But that's hard to produce.
I think one thing people like to be safe, and you can find a really nice safe space, and it just gets smaller, and as you get more special, smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And I think I'm quite specialised within user research, but I can do this stuff as well, and it just becomes nice and safer and safer and safer. And then you've got to try and get people to kind of extend out more and more and more and more. And that's
okay, so I'm going to take that. I have the other thing that I think I promised to go back to earlier, which sort of sits in this space. And in any conflict situation, I was trained, I had psychologists that were with me, we were trained on how to take care of ourselves, okay? How to stop stuff getting in, and then how to process the things that people give you, and then how actually in the moment can you deal with stress and conflict. I want to spend a few minutes in here because I think this can be a really useful space for people. Quick story about me. I teach people to rock climb, and one of the first things people do when they're nervous is they stop breathing. Okay, they go really rigid, and it's quite a bizarre thing to see. And if you can slow your breathing down, physiologically slow yourself down, you feel calmer. And it's amazing how something as simple as that can help. Okay, so again, it's an open question. I'm interested from your own points of view and your own experiences. Is there any things that you found help in terms of taking care of self?
The thing that I always remember is it's not ever about me. It's always about the other person, because its egos come into it. Mm-hmm. So when somebody's, upset or angry or whatever, it's not.
Yeah, you just happen to be in the room.
Yeah,
yes.
It's not something that I've done,
And I think that the useful technique I always been taught, I always find it useful, is to depersonalise it. So it's not about people; it's about the things going on, the activity or the.
Yeah. So that's part of good feedback, really. I think you touched on that earlier. That a great form of feedback isn't a shit sandwich. You did this, you did that. It's this is what happened. This is what we do next. So depersonalising can help. Yeah, go on.
So I think for me, when I was talking about when I was working with Gwen for the second time, it's a good thing. We like I said, we were at each other's throats. We hated each other. It was disastrous, and everything went to shit. Let's call it what it is. And then after some time, we kind of realised that actually it's not us. It was some other stuff that was kind of affecting us. And we kind of stopped caring to some extent, and we kind of went back to being humans again and
Joe
realised
started
actually
pairing
that.
with me and stuff like that. And just like, you know, we actually started working on things together.
Yeah, we were working together, we were building each other's like skill set up, and we were doing some really cool shit. And it was beneficial to the business, but at the same time we were both leaving that business because we didn't have to deal with that bullshit anymore. It was fantastic, and after time we kind of pulled it back in and being humans and being good to each other.
So one of the classic duress behaviours, you've heard of freeze, fight, flight?
Yeah.
So freeze and flock are the other two. So when people are stressed and upset, we'll flock together. That's why we go to the pub.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's a space where you can let this stuff out.
So that's exactly what we did. We would like I said, we were arguing with each other all day, every day at work. And we came for a beer. It's like, oh, isn't life good?
Yeah.
And actually, like, it wasn't until we actually finally moved on and we kind of looked after ourselves, like, what you got on board and became good friends again.
Subtle changes in the language you use, because I know, like marriage guidance and CANS do stuff where you stop using the word you never listen to me. It's like, I feel unheard. It's kind of trying to get to that kind of stuff to help.
Sometimes that doesn't help if the person's in absolute.
Some people lack insight, but something I would say about that, always be prepared to listen to the feedback, because they're giving you an awful lot of information about themselves and what their issues are and things. And
I think that's true. Like, we're all in it together, and we've got the same goals at heart, but it's just a different way of saying it. So.
Okay, sorry, you had a.
I think not being afraid of conflict is really important as well, because if you spend all the time hiding from it, then you don't open those dialogues where you understand what the other person's thinking. And then when you do actually embrace the conflict and say, actually, I'm not happy about this, then they can say, oh, well, that's because this, and you're like, oh, fair enough.
Yeah, the emotional energy that you can expend avoiding something can actually be worse than just putting up with what comes out. Is that the kind of thing that you're saying?
Just lay it out, and then someone can explain why they're doing something one way, and you're like, fine.
Yeah, just move on.
And it's about taking then some form of control in the conversation, in that if the other person doesn't know some of these things, they might get angry, they might do all kinds of things and say stuff that in not a very good way. But if you still keep that in control, and I won't get angry, and I'll try and interpret what you're doing, and I'll try and do that job for you, that puts you in a lot more in control, and you're not in an argument.
I'll tell you the word you haven't used that I'm sure you would this evening is agency.
Yeah, that one.
Do you want to use that word?
Yeah. It's kind of a psychology to always taking back that agency, that you have some control, that you have the control, you have choices about what happens next and how things should be, and you have choices over your own emotions and how you choose to feel, and it's not always easy, but it's trying to get into that.
And what if you can't? When that person invokes an emotion, you struggle with that process of getting control of that.
I think there's a novelty element here, but the first time you experience this thing, it might be really hard and everything's heightened, you don't know what to do, and you're exploring it, you make mistakes, it'll get worse, blah, blah, blah. But it's the 10th time, actually you've been kicking these ideas around, why is this scenario happening, what happened, what worked well, what didn't work, and the more you repeat the exercise, and the more this thing about embracing conflict, the more you start working it through and have approaches trying to resolve certain scenarios.
Yep.
A lot of this stuff is a skill.
As well. Because all of that relates, if you're looking at an individual, it's all confidence, and if you've got the confidence, you can enter any of those situations and be confident to come out the other end. And as James said, if you're doing that for the 10th time, you'll pick up a lot more confidence, and therefore it will become a lot more easy.
Yeah, there's an experiential learning thing. Absolutely, yeah. The more you do this, the easier it gets. Oh, lots more hands, sorry.
I kind of also think there's this like a where you are, like the being human thing. So like to me, within my family, like if something bad happens, we all just kind of get shouty for a little bit, but like 5 minutes later we're all friends again. Whereas some people really take it to heart. And I guess there's a little bit there where you need to understand the people that you work with and how they take conflict. Because actually, for me personally, I'm quite happy to have a Barney. But I get over it really quickly. But some people don't. And I think that's where you need to understand the team and be able to interpret how they kind of...
It is. I'm going to try just saying.
Sorry.
That beautifully leads me into the last two post-its that I've been trying to get on for the last 5 minutes, which is about, no one read them that clearly, about tolerance and compassion. You know, if you don't know what else to do, then this is a really good place to start, actually, in conflict. So thank you.
At the end of the day, you've got to remember, you've got the right to remove yourself from any situation you're not comfortable in.
So it's back to agency. You've got choice. You've got power.
If somebody's yelling at me and swearing at me, you know, I would just, I'm not accepting this behaviour.
And that's when sometimes stuff can be reduced. You can get third parties in, and sometimes it would either be done through a third party or through writing. Not email, I mean writing.
Yeah,
by hand.
But in an extreme situation, I have the right to be treated how I expect to be treated, and somebody's being abusive to me, I will walk away.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the bit about understanding your team. So like if I had someone that worked with me that I knew wasn't comfortable with conflict, then I wouldn't bring conflict to them. I would look for other ways in which to deal with it. But like personally, if someone has conflict with me, I'm quite comfortable with that.
And we're all different.
Like hold it against them in 6 months' time.
Well, we're all very different people. So, folks, I'm conscious of time. Roy keeps looking at his watch over here. We've done it about an hour and 5-10 minutes now. I think we probably need to be kind of bringing this into land.
Right. Yeah, we just need 5 minutes or so at the end. I mean, we got another 5 minutes maybe.
Okay, so if I sort of close it from our side, so that's a construct. It's a bunch of things you can use to try and figure out what's going on in the moment potentially. There are things you can do to take care of yourself in the moment. You can prepare before, you can offload afterwards. So don't carry it around with you as baggage. We touched on 1 or 2 techniques. It felt like we needed a lot more time. Actually, normally this is pushing a whole day in a workshop in an organisation for me. Fear cropped up. Actually, I didn't have room on the brown paper for that. Some people fear the emotion being judged, the uncertainty of what might happen. But other people talked about experience and doing it and just being okay with that. And over time, you get better with it. And learning to be tolerant and compassionate of each other. Learning to give useful feedback, seek useful feedback, talk to each other. So that's kind of my take on what we collectively kind of just spent the last hour talking about. Any Q&As for the last couple of minutes? Any other thoughts?
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
So when you're running this in organisations, are you typically running this in a, I don't know, maybe like a leadership group or something, or is it often in teams that have they may have some conflict or some underlying conflict, and just this whole process, getting in a room with a bunch of post-it notes on the wall, is I can imagine it being a very helpful thing to do.
Yeah, we used it over in Manchester recently with a really effective organisation that wants to move to the next level, and they were very much of the view, actually conflict's really good for us, and we're being too nice to each other. So what spaces can we stray into? How can we really go to the next level? I've used it with the NHS, where they're absolutely terrified of having these conversations, performance management conversations. And basically, behind their brown paper is they're going to get sued, or it's going to end up in a tribunal. So you can do it in lots of different places. It's a conversation starter, really. I mean, we do a lot of soft skills development, and this is quite a nice way of unpacking and playing. Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.